We just got the final episode to The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and as you read from the title, I think this is a bad TV show. So here's my review. Before we get into it, share your thoughts in the comments down below. What did you think of this show? Personally, this is surprisingly one of my least favorite things in the MCU, and I'm going to tell you why. Let's just get right into it. So obviously, this is the second ever MCU TV show. It had to follow up WandaVision, which I absolutely loved. You can check out my review of WandaVision up there, or up there. But yeah, I absolutely loved WandaVision, and originally, this was supposed to come out before WandaVision, but I'm glad it didn't, because if this came out first, we would have thought that every MCU TV show is going to be lower than the films, which is what I think this is. This is worse than most of their movies. But since we got WandaVision first, we know that these MCU TV shows can be good. This one wasn't. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier takes place soon after Endgame and carries on the Captain America storyline. Captain America is my favorite MCU hero, so I was really interested to see how his legacy continues in the MCU, and you know, I found it very disappointing. And now let's get started with spoilers. There will be spoilers in this review, so finish the show, come back to this. Now first I'm going to be talking about the good of this show, because there are some good things about it. I thought the Flag Smashers was a pretty cool idea. We had this group of people who liked life better during the blip, and that's pretty interesting. But then the way they carried on that storyline wasn't the best. Second positive, I liked seeing Zemo in the show. I thought he was pretty good. He didn't seem to have much of a purpose, but I liked seeing him come back so he's not just in Civil War. And he was good with Falcon and Bucky, I guess. I also liked seeing some Wakandans in this show. Now, they probably shouldn't have had it in there, because it's yet another plotline that we had to keep track of. But it was interesting to have Wakanda take a little part in this show. They want to take Zemo prisoner. And then I liked seeing some backstory for Bucky at the beginning of episode 4 when they showed him not turning into the Winter Soldier when the Wakandans said those words. I thought that was good. That was a great beginning to that episode. And finally, I liked the action. I liked the action in this show. It was really good at times. When you could see what's happening, it was good, but come back to that later. And let's move on to the bad. The pacing is absolutely awful in almost every episode, especially episode 5, where they go straight from this dark conversation with Isaiah and Sam, straight from that to Bucky and Sam working on the boat. It's awful pacing. They started that episode with a big action scene. They shoved every single plotline into that one episode, and the pacing was awful. And that's basically how it was all throughout the show. They did not know how to pace it. Also, this is some of the worst dialogue in the MCU. Maybe the absolute worst. The dialogue is really bad in every episode, and I cringed way too much during this show. This is the first time that I've really hated something in the MCU on first watch. That's because of the awful dialogue that is just hard to listen to. The actors do their best with this dialogue, but it doesn't work. Like that big monologue that Sam gives in the middle of episode 6. It should be good, but then it's not good dialogue. Anthony Mackie did his best, but it still doesn't work. This whole show was just really clumsy. They tried to shove way too many plot lines in. It's the same as what I would say for Iron Man 2. They just had so many plot lines in there. They shoved way too much in there, and because of that, none of the plot lines got developed, and none of them seemed important because there was too much. That's why Iron Man 2 is my least favorite MCU film, and that's why Falcon and the Winter Soldier might be one of my least favorite MCU projects. You have the Flag Smashers, you have John Walker, you have Sam and Bucky, you have Wakanda, you have Zemo, you have Isaiah, that old super soldier, and they even tried to tackle things like race and racism, and it's just too much. They didn't know how to do any of it because there were too many plot lines to balance in this small 6-episode show. Whoever thought this show should be 6 episodes. I don't know what they were doing, because they had so many ideas, enough for 3 different TV shows, but they tried to smush it in these 6 episodes, and nothing got developed, nothing got fleshed out, because there was too much. But even with all of those plot lines, there's not one thing that was interesting for the first 3 episodes. The first 3 episodes have absolutely no plot. It's just stuff happening. For half of the show, it's just stuff happening, and there's really nothing interesting going on. It felt like they never progressed the plot at all for the first half of the show. And that's why episode 4 is actually good, because they finally did something with the plot. That's easily my favorite episode. Spoilers, but I'll give you my ranking of the episodes at the end of this video. But yeah, that's really frustrating when you have all these ideas and you can't make one of them interesting for the first half of the show. Next, I think the action is actually annoying at times. The action, sometimes it's great, like I said, but sometimes you really can't understand what's happening at all. In episode 6, the finale, Falcon's flying around and then he throws the shield at the helicopter, and somehow that gets the pilot out of the helicopter. I don't understand how he did that. It didn't show what he did, and there's a lot of action where the camera's like shaking all around, and each shot is like a half a second, and you can't see what's happening, so that's why sometimes the action is kind of annoying, because I want to see what's happening, but really can't. Everything with the characters was incredibly disappointing. Now, I love the entire Captain America trilogy. I love all 3 of those movies so much, and a lot of that is due to the characters, because Steve Rogers is an amazing character. I love what they did with him throughout the trilogy. I love what they did with Bucky throughout the trilogy, and Sam is also pretty good. But the way they carried on these characters was really disappointing, and the character motivations never make sense. Apparently, Bucky had an arc, but we don't really get to see that arc. At the end of the show, he finally admits to this guy that he is the murderer of his son. He murdered him while he was the Winter Soldier, which he couldn't bring himself to admit at the beginning of the show. So they're trying to say that he had an arc over the course of these 6 episodes, but he really didn't. The only good stuff with his character was seeing the backstory, and nobody had an arc in this show. They expect us to forgive John Walker because he tried to save this truck from falling into the water. Well, that's not how it works. I mean, he murdered someone with the shield, and then I saw people like, wow, John Walker, he earned my respect this episode. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's not how it works. He murdered someone with the shield. The character motivations make absolutely no sense, especially Sharon Carter. She hasn't worked in any role in the MCU. She's the worst part of Captain America Civil War, in my opinion. And then in here, she's the power broker somehow. I hate her character. She's one of the worst things in the MCU, period. And finally, Carly. She was a fine character, I guess, but she was also really bad in a lot of ways because she was literally just about to kill Sam, but then when she's killed 2 seconds later, she's like, I'm sorry. You expect us to believe that she's sorry? No, she's not. She was about to kill Sam. She was about to kill a bunch of hostages. They expect us to feel bad for John Walker. They expect us to feel bad for Carly. But I don't. They did horrible things. They murdered. And it was a horrible wrap-up to the show. Also, the way the dialogue is written made Falcon and Bucky act different than they ever have before, because the dialogue that was written for them really didn't fit their character at all. And yeah, that is all the stuff I hated about the show. The pacing is awful, the dialogue is awful, there are way too many plot lines, and none of the characters even act the way they should, and none of the character motivations are fleshed out at all. And coming to the ranking of the episodes, I would say in last place is episode 5, Truth. This was a horribly paced episode, making it basically impossible for the finale to do anything right, and that's why number 5 is episode 6, One World, One People. Coming in number 4 is episode 3, Power Broker. Coming in at number 3 is episode 1, New World Order. I thought it was pretty cool to see our heroes in regular life situations. That's why I kind of like episode 1. Number 2 is episode 2, The Star-Spangled Man. And number 1 is easily episode 4, The Whole World Is Watching, because that one actually carried on the plot a little bit after the first 3 did absolutely nothing. So yeah, as a follow-up to the first MCU TV show, WandaVision, this is awful. As a follow-up to the Captain America trilogy, one of the best trilogies of all time, it's a horrible follow-up. And just as an MCU project in general, this was extremely disappointing for me. And it is the first time that something in the MCU I call bad. I would say this is a bad show on the first watch. I really liked Captain Marvel at first. I really liked Iron Man 2 at first. But now I think those are bad films. This is the first time I've ever said an MCU thing is bad the first time I saw it. So, I'm going to give The Falcon and the Winter Soldier a 3 out of 10 overall. Thanks for watching. That was my review, kind of a rant on Falcon and the Winter Soldier. There were some little good things in there, but overall, a huge disappointment. It does not live up to MCU standards at all. Hopefully the Loki show will still be really good. But yeah, thanks for watching, and see you next time.